What makes or breaks an NBA franchise? Fundamentally, contracts. The right deal at the right time can build a dynasty, but the wrong one, it can sink a team for years. Over the years, NBA teams have handed out $70 million checks to bench warmers who barely crack the rotation, max contracts to injury-prone stars who never saw the courts, and deals to role players who completely disappeared when it mattered most. These weren't just bad contracts, they were franchise killers that left fans stunned and teams stuck. Today, we're breaking down the 5 dumbest NBA contracts ever signed. And trust me, the third deal is so ridiculous, it still haunts the franchise to this day. Gilbert Arenas. Imagine this. In 2013, Gilbert Arenas was making nearly $22 million without playing a single game. Superstar money just to sit at home. How did this financial nightmare happen? Just a few years earlier, the Washington Wizards had handed Arenas a 6-year, $111 million deal in 2008, even though his knees had already been through multiple surgeries. Then came the infamous locker room gun incident, more injuries, and declining play. By 2010, Washington was desperate to dump him. Enter the Orlando Magic. Hoping to give Dwight Howard another star for a title run, they traded Rashard Lewis for Arenas in December 2010. On paper, Arenas was only 28 and still carried all-star name value. But in reality, his explosiveness was gone. His knees betrayed him, and his jumper disappeared. He limped through his first half season with Orlando, averaging just 8 points on 34% shooting. By the next year, he was buried on the bench. Here's the kicker. Orlando had inherited 3 more years and $62 million of his deal. They had basically swapped one terrible contract, Rashard Lewis, for an even worse one. And unlike Lewis, Arenas couldn't even stay in the rotation. By December 2011, the Magic had no choice but to use the NBA's newly created amnesty clause to waive him. That meant Arenas was gone from their roster, but Orlando still had to keep paying him, just not against their cap. And so, while Arenas briefly resurfaced in 2012 with the Memphis Grizzlies, averaging a forgettable 4 points in 17 games, he was mostly just cashing enormous checks. The peak of the absurdity came in 2013, when Arenas, without playing a single second, was literally one of the NBA's highest paid players. Ironically, Arenas later laughed it off, calling it the smartest contract ever. But for Orlando, it was a disaster, crippling their flexibility, wasting millions, and cementing this deal as one of the dumbest contracts in NBA history. Joakim Noah. Imagine paying $72 million for a player who gave you less than 100 games total and only averaged 4.6 points per night. That's exactly what the New York Knicks did when they signed Joakim Noah in the summer of 2016. 4 years, $72 million, and what followed was one of the biggest financial disasters in franchise history. The shocking part? By the time Noah put pen to paper, his body was already breaking down. He was 31 years old, had multiple knee surgeries behind him, and hadn't looked like an all-star since 2014. Yet Phil Jackson and the Knicks ignored the red flags, banking on Noah's defensive energy and veteran leadership. Instead, they got injuries, suspensions, and a contract that became untradeable within months. Noah's first season in New York was a train wreck. He played only 46 games, shooting an abysmal 43% from the free throw line. Then came the bombshell. He was suspended 20 games for violating the NBA's anti-drug policy for a banned substance. By year 2, he wasn't even in the rotation, clashing with head coach Jeff Hornacek and getting exiled from the team. The Knicks paid him superstar money to sit at home. Here's where it gets really interesting. The 2016 offseason wasn't just about Noah. It was the infamous cap spike year, where the league's salary cap jumped from $70 million to $94 million overnight thanks to the new TV deal. Teams went wild handing out massive contracts. Timofey Mozgov, Luol Deng, Bismack Biyombo, and Noah's deal became the face of that reckless spending spree. Another wild detail, the Knicks eventually used the stretch provision to waive Noah in 2018, which meant they were still paying him through the 2021-22 season. That's 6 years of financial pain for less than 2 years of encore contribution. Imagine cutting a player and still seeing his name on your payroll almost half a decade later. And here's the cruel twist. Just 2 years before signing with New York, Noah had won Defensive Player of the Year and finished 4th in MVP voting with Chicago. His decline was so steep and so fast that it had turned what could have been a feel-good reunion story Noah was a New York native, into one of the most ridiculed contracts of all time. In the end, Joakim Noah's Knicks deal wasn't just dumb, it was catastrophic. The $72 million contract tied up cap space, poisoned flexibility, and came to represent the dysfunction of that era. Fans hated it, booing Noah relentlessly, while analysts ranked it among the league's worst. Even Noah himself later admitted regret, a painful reminder of how quickly hope in New York turned into lasting disappointment. Chandler Parson. $94 million, 4 years, 95 games only. That's the shocking legacy of Chandler Parsons' time with the Memphis Grizzlies. Signed in the summer of 2016, Parsons' deal is often remembered as the single worst contract in franchise history and one of the dumbest of the entire cap spike era. Here's the kicker. Memphis gave him a max contract despite Parsons having undergone 2 major knee surgeries in Dallas. By the time he arrived in Memphis, his athleticism was already fading, but the Grizzlies bet that his shooting and playmaking would be the missing piece next to Marc Gasol and Mike Conley. Instead, they got a max salary player averaging just 7.2 points per game across 3 seasons. His debut year told the whole story. Parsons played just 26 games in 2016 and 17, shooting a career worst 33% from the field and looking nothing like the versatile forward Memphis thought they were signing. The knee issues never went away. He had multiple procedures during his Grizzlies stint, and he was reduced to limited minutes, DNPs, and eventually the bench. By year 3, the Grizzlies were openly negotiating to trade him away from the team. For diehard fans, the 2016 offseason context makes Parsons' deal even more infamous. That summer, thanks to the NBA's new TV money, the salary cap ballooned to $24 million overnight. Teams started throwing max contracts at anyone with upside. Chandler Parsons was one of the poster boys for reckless spending. Memphis wasn't just caught in the storm, they drowned in it. Another fascinating detail, Memphis didn't just sign Parsons, they outbid Portland and Dallas to do it. Both teams, familiar with his medical history, had concerns about offering him full max money. The Grizzlies ignored the warning signs, desperate to add a star to keep their grit and grind core relevant in the West. That gamble backfired spectacularly, saddling them with a cap-clogging contract that hamstrung their flexibility during Conley and Gasol's prime years. And the drama didn't stop at injuries. In early 2019, for G League assignment, Parsons had a public fallout with the Grizzlies when he disagreed with how he would be integrated back into the Memphis Grizzlies NBA roster after a prolonged period of injury. Memphis essentially told him to stay home, even though they were paying him $24 million that season. A max player, sitting on the bench. By July 2019, Memphis finally dumped Parsons in a salary dump trade to Atlanta, ending one of their most painful eras in team history. In the end, Chandler Parsons' contract wasn't just dumb, it was franchise paralyzing. The $94 million deal symbolized a small market team swinging for the fences, ignoring every red flag. Fans booed him at games. Reddit mocked the signing, and injuries combined with minimal production turned it into one of the worst contracts of the 21st century. For Grizzlies supporters, that number isn't just money, it's a lasting scar. John Wall. $170 million. 4 years. Injuries that stole entire seasons. That's the legacy of John Wall's Supermax extension with the Washington Wizards. Signed in July 2017, Wall's deal was meant to lock in a franchise cornerstone, but the body can only take so much. Here's the kicker. Wall was still an all-star on paper, but his knees and heels were already nagging him. By the time the contract kicked in, his explosive speed and elite playmaking were starting to falter. Instead of a dominant floor general, Washington ended up with a max salary player whose availability was limited by repeated injuries. The first year under the extension set the tone. Wall played 41 games in 2017 and 18, missing stretches due to knee issues and ongoing rehabilitation. By the following season, he underwent left heel surgery, and in December 2018, a catastrophic Achilles rupture sidelined him for the entire 2019 and 20 season. In total, Wall played just 73 games for the Wizards during the contract period, averaging 20.7 points and 8.7 assists when healthy, but those flashes were rare amid long absences. The Wizards were paying superstar money for a player often off the court, creating a cap situation that hampered roster flexibility. By December 2020, Washington traded Wall to the Houston Rockets, in exchange for Russell Westbrook and a first-round pick. Even in Houston, injuries continued to limit his impact. Wall was bought out in February 2022, eventually signing with the Los Angeles Clippers that summer. By the time he joined the Clippers, Wall was no longer the explosive all-star who could control games at will. His body had taken its toll, and the Wizards were left with the financial consequences of a contract that paid superstar money while injuries kept him off the floor. In the end, John Wall's Supermax wasn't just a big contract, it was a cautionary tale. $170 million paid to a player who could only deliver sporadically due to injury, forcing Washington to adapt and rebuild around a plan that never fully materialized. For Wizards fans, that number isn't just money. It's a stark reminder of how even the brightest talent can be sidelined by the unpredictable nature of the game. Ben Simmons, $177 million, 5 years, minimal production, and constant controversy. That's the shocking legacy of Ben Simmons' max contract with the Philadelphia 76ers and Brooklyn Nets. Signed in July 2019, Simmons' deal was supposed to cement him as the cornerstone of Philly's title hopes, but things quickly went sideways. Here's the kicker. Simmons was still young, fresh off multiple All-Star selections and an All-Defensive First-Team honor. On paper, he had all-NBA potential, but cracks were already forming in his game. Over the next few seasons, injuries, mental health struggles, and off-court issues combined to limit his impact, making him one of the most expensive underperformers in recent NBA history. The first red flag came during the 2020-21 playoffs. Simmons struggled in high-pressure moments, most notably in the series against the Atlanta Hawks, where he refused open shots and made critical mistakes. Public criticism mounted, and doubts about his confidence and commitment became impossible to ignore. The situation worsened in 2021-22. Simmons refused to play for the 76ers, citing mental health and requesting a trade. He didn't log a single minute for Philly that season, yet his max-level salary continued to count against the team's cap. The contract, which was meant to lock in a franchise star, became an immovable financial burden. In February 2022, Simmons was traded to the Brooklyn Nets in a blockbuster deal that sent James Harden to Philadelphia. Even in Brooklyn, struggles continued. Simmons battled back injuries, nerve issues, and inconsistency, appearing in only 57 of the team's 191 games during his tenure. Production failed to match his massive paycheck, averaging stats more befitting for a role player than a $40 million per year All-Star. In February 2025, Simmons and the Nets agreed to a buyout, ending his tumultuous stint. What was meant to be a 5-year, $177 million investment in a generational talent instead became a cautionary tale. Max money from minimal output, injuries, and public controversies. In the end, Ben Simmons' contract wasn't just expensive, it was catastrophic. $177 million to a player who spent long stretches off the court, leaving teams scrambling for alternatives and fans questioning every front office decision. For 76ers and Nets supporters alike, that number isn't just money. It's a stark reminder of how quickly potential can turn into a financial and roster nightmare. And that wraps up our breakdown of the 5 dumbest NBA contracts ever. From injury-ridden stars to max salary benchwarmers, these weren't just bad deals. They crippled teams, reshaped rosters, and even forced the league to rewrite its own rules. But here's the real question. Did we miss one? Which contract do you think deserves the crown as the absolute worst in NBA history? Drop your answers in the comments. We'll be pinning the best takes. If you love this breakdown, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the wildest, most unbelievable NBA stories we've got coming your way.